Hi there, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview business leaders, industry experts to share their knowledge, their wisdom, their experience to help you grow your business. I truly believe that sometimes a single insight can completely change your business direction to help you achieve your business goals. In this episode, I interview Randall Craig. Randall is an industry expert, not only technology and marketing, but is also expert in bridging the gaps between those two. I think you're gonna enjoy this discussion because Randall shares many different perspectives, especially with the marketing strategy when it comes to McDonald's strategy versus a Five Guys strategies. So we had our discussions on various different topics, and I think it will provide different perspective for you to help grow your business as well. So before we go, don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also share that among your friends, and please also don't forget to send us your feedback. Until next time, enjoy my discussion with Randall. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Hi guys, welcome to another leadership podcast. Today my guest is Randall Craig. Randall has been advising on a digital strategy since 1994. When he put a Toronto Star online, several other financial institutions, and also about another 100 other businesses. He's the author of 8 books, including Digital Transformation for Associations and Everything Guide to Starting an Online Business. He speaks and advises on a digital strategy, trust, and transformation. And you can visit his website, Randall Craig, for more at randallcraig.com and get some more details. Welcome to podcast, Randall. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thrilled to be here. Thanks, Gurmeet.
So give us a little bit of your background. How does somebody inspire to be a speaker on a thought leadership and trusted advisor, Randall?
Well, you spend an entire career learning about something, applying it, getting better at it, writing about it, researching it. Mm-hmm. And people say, yeah, that's interesting to me. In terms of my perspective, I spent 9 years at KPMG. I spent a number of years growing a company and eventually selling it. Mm-hmm. I spent 3 years a part of the executive team of an American public company. I start and built and sold another company, and all of my consulting and all my work has been in the area of digital strategy. Mm-hmm. And digital strategy certainly from the very beginning was never about broadcast and advertising only. It was always about finding a way to help others recognize that you have value to add. You're not selling to somebody, you're leading people through the buying process. And one of the key ways to do that, certainly, as in the professional services world, accounting, law, consulting, engineering, anything that uses your brain, it was always about helping them understand that you've got knowledge, and B, that your knowledge can solve their problem. Mm-hmm. This is true, not just in professional services, but pretty much every business has got some degree of service aspect to it, a knowledge aspect to it. And because of that, that's how I developed my expertise. Putting the Toronto Star online was a very interesting one because, every single day it's a new newspaper. Mm-hmm. Right? You had to find stuff that was interesting to the viewer. Putting KPMG online years and years and years ago, it was a question of saying, hey, gee, we might be great advisors. You don't want to read about how great we are. You want to read about how we can solve your problem, the tax tip of the day, or deeper knowledge about a particular topic. So after doing all this, I wrote quite a few books. You mentioned 8. Mm-hmm. And people would read the books and say, boy, that's those are interesting insights. Those are interesting frameworks. Can you speak at my conference? Mm-hmm. Okay, so fine. I would speak at the conference and people would say, yeah, that's order out of chaos. It makes it a little bit easier to understand. Do you think you might be able to come back to my organization and help us apply those particular frameworks, or teach us about them so we could do it ourselves? So fine, that sort of zips into some consulting where you get to refresh and go deeper into your area of expertise, these particular frameworks. And as a result of that, have more information that you could write about, whether it be in my tip sheets and randallcraig.com, or my books, or my white papers, et cetera, which then starts the cycle all over again. So, you learn more, you write about it, people ask you to speak about it, then people ask you to apply it, and so on and so forth.
Nice,
So,
nice. So these companies you work with, one of the things, companies realized, especially with the COVID, where we just gone through, that company had a better digital strategy, or they were already digitized, certain business process. They kind of reaped the rewards during the COVID, because when everything shut down, technology was still moving the businesses forward. So these companies you work with, did they see that, it could happen one day? Was it driven from business risk, or was it driven from business strategy, or was it just out of that, hey, listen, I don't want to have carry all those manual processes. I just need to automate some of those processes. So what was the main driver for these companies?
Well, I took one word out of that question. It's a good question. I don't think there's very many companies that said, you know what, I think we've got a plan specifically for the COVID pandemic, right? Of course, many organizations began to shift a lot of their IT infrastructure onto the cloud, right? And no doubt over the last 10 years, quite a few companies have understood the opportunity of using social media to drive engagement. And certainly, from a digital strategy perspective, before COVID, there was a lot more interest in, say, transformation. And I'm not talking about technology transformation. I'm talking about business transformation, which digital might be able to enable. Okay, or where digital might be able to provide a completely different perspective on it. So except for the legal beagles who had a force majeure clause in contracts, most did not sort of plan for it. So I wouldn't say what my clients and others have been doing these last 2 years has been a result of forethought, either from strategy or from risk mitigation. But I would say in the last couple of years, it was a dramatic catch up for a lot of organizations to realize that if they wanted to be solvent, they had to find new ways to work, both in terms of within their teams, okay, and also with respect to their suppliers, and also with respect to their prospects and clients. And the better ones may have made some of these technology investments, okay, but to tell you the truth, every organization has got a momentum of its own. And because it's got a momentum of its own, you can't sort of take an organization that's got a very slow momentum and suddenly say, okay, we're going on the major highway here at 100 miles an hour. No, because beyond the technology catch up that actually has had to happen in the last while during COVID, there's also been a dramatic cultural shift. People have discovered how to work from a home office. Managers, often for the first time, had to learn how to manage a remote workforce, right? All of a sudden, managers who may have managed by, 9 o'clock, they came in right on time. 5 o'clock, it's quitting time, off they go. No, all of a sudden, for the first time, managers are managing to task. Hey, you've got a deadline of X, it's due next Wednesday. Okay, let me know if there's problems, but otherwise, I'm looking forward to seeing your work on Wednesday. And the fact that somebody, for example, starts at 7:30 or 8, or starts at 10, as long as the thing gets done by Wednesday, this is a massive, massive cultural shift. And interestingly, Gurmeet, this as a technologist, adoption of technology is actually something that requires a cultural shift. The old days of typewriters versus word processors. Yeah. The idea of, we've got a typing pool versus I'm just going to type my email myself. It takes a very big mindset shift. So a lot of my clients, okay, and certainly others as well, if we look back at COVID, it was a question of, okay, so we've got to fast forward a bunch of things. And some people did well and some people didn't. Some businesses, because of all the supply chain issues that were going on, had other fish to fry. Rather than just quote technology or marketing, et cetera, they had the question of how do we get product, or how do we recruit people if we can't sort of take them out to a restaurant for the final interview, at the more senior levels, right? It's a little bit more difficult. But I think what people are discovering, is that yes, technology makes it possible, but people make it happen. And that more than anything else, whether we're talking about digital transformation, whether we're talking about marketing strategies like being a thought leader or trusted advisor, it all boils down to the people and enabling them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned very interesting 2 points. One is definitely, technology got a little bit, more buy-in, easy buy-in from people. People were, the leaders, they were sitting on the edge of that. Should we invest in technology? It kind of speeded up that, without technology, you're not going to have any adoption. But the other thing you mentioned is I think I see a lot of business leaders struggle with that, is simply, the work environment changed. People working from home, the hours are changed, as you mentioned, but also the way we manage people, that changed as well. Before, pre-COVID or before COVID, easy to put up people in one room and deliver your expectation and manage them through communication is one skill set. But now managing through technologies, people wherever they are, they're working at a different time, different environments. Trying to manage that through Zoom calls or Teams, maybe a different skill set. You think it's creating a leadership challenges that how to manage people, how to manage the expectations on a daily basis?
I think we're a little bit beyond that right now. If you asked me at the beginning of COVID, I'd say, oh yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of organizations that are maybe still figuring it out. But at the time of this recording, which is in October 2021, we have a lot of companies that have been through this for a year and a half now. They've been through one fiscal cycle. They've had to hire people. They couldn't defer hiring. They had to let people go. They had to figure out how to allow people to work from home or work from the office in a completely different kind of way. They had to, so yeah, it's a challenge. I think though that there's another challenge happening too. And this is in the IT groups, the technology groups. I would divide technology departments, and here we're not talking about the smallest businesses where they tend to be relatively agile, but sometimes challenged in other ways. But for medium and large organization, there seems to be two different groups, the ignorant and the leaders. Okay. And when I say ignorant, these people understand technology, they understand architecture, they actually are very good at their jobs. But what I mean by ignorant is that it becomes too easy to believe every vendor or consultant that knocks on your door and says, gee, if you buy SharePoint, that is digital transformation. Boy, if you put in Salesforce, your sales will go up, right? If only you put SAP in, then your ERP processes would be fully, perfectly integrated, right? Those are the ignorant ones. And I'm sure everyone listening to this is going to say, well, that's not me, right? And the leaders are the ones that say, okay, well, sure, we've got software, but even if you take a look at one of these large implementations, I don't care whether it's SAP or Salesforce, the salespeople will tell you that you should just implement it because embedded within it is best practice. Yeah. Now, a CEO would say, but 1 second, the reason why we're differentiated from everybody else is because we don't have a generic best practice. We understand our customers better than anyone else, and we've honed our processes. So the way we work is better than best practices. We're totally up here. And if we do the same as everybody else because the software that's running our business is the same as everyone's else, where's our strategic advantage? Where's our competitive, sustainable advantage? It's not there, right? On the other hand, if you don't look at what's embedded as best practices in the software, guess what? It could be that some of the things you're doing you may think is better than best, but in fact, it might actually be vestigial, left over from the 1950s or 70s or 90s, right? And it should be looked at in a different way. Yeah. So whether you customize completely at great cost and expense, okay, and have very little disruption in terms of the internal processes, or you take it straight out of the box, embed best practices, a lot cheaper to implement, but oh boy, what a disruption there is on the ground with everyone not knowing what to do. This is the kind of thing that leaders say, I think we could figure that one out, right? And we could find out exactly where we need to fit rather than just blindly, like the ignorant, say, hey, listen, we're just going to go on social media.
Yeah.
We're just going to do Salesforce. We're going to just, do abracadabra.
Yeah.
Okay. And when it came to COVID, sadly, okay, a lot of IT departments maybe were in the ignorant category rather than the leaders category.
Mm-hmm.
And it became a lot more challenging to actually do this. And I think one of the better things, if we look back on COVID, is that IT departments, the better ones, realize that they don't want to be ignorant, and the leaders who realize that, boy, this is what leadership means, recognize that there's a role for IT at the strategic table, not just at the tactical table.
Yeah.
And if you want to sit at the strategic table, all of a sudden you've got to range well beyond just purely the nuts and bolts, the clickety here and clickety there. Okay, and say, how might we use some of this technology to truly differentiate organization? Right? What opportunities might technology provide that would cause the organization's strategy to pivot 5 or 10 degrees, or maybe 50 degrees, 45 degrees, right? So that's a very different thing, which is, very different from, say, strategy of, call it 10 years ago, where people would say, here's the strategic plan. And then underneath that, we've got, here's the HR plan, and here's the marketing plan, and here's the IT plan, and the IT people and the HR and the marketing and all the other groups will come up with their strategic plans, which are really just underneath the umbrella of the overall. And that made total sense, except for the fact that perhaps with some creativity and some forethought, maybe some of the things that technology makes possible might actually be an input into what that overall strategy is altogether.
Yep.
So when I talk about digital transformation, really what I'm talking about isn't let's implement Salesforce or SAP. Let's not sort of figure out how to have a hybrid, work from home and reduce our real estate costs.
Yeah.
It's really a question of how might we use technology in a way to have an impact on the strategy of the organization. And this is true for the smallest companies to the largest ones. It's just a question of scale, rather than just being an output tactical, plumber of pipes, if you know what I mean.
The cost of the system implemented as if he's not done right, is a huge cost to the businesses, right? If you look at the soft cost or deploying any of those systems without a proper thought process, it's a huge cost to companies. And what I'm hearing from you is, before they look for what system they're going to buy, what software they're going to buy, having internal best practices, what are you trying to achieve with that, with the software, is more critical than doing all the homework and figuring out how we're going to implement, how we're going to customize to our business requirements, our business needs. That's a lot more important than simply just going shopping and buying.
Okay, Gurmeet, you're talking 1985 here. So sorry. Okay, let me push you here. Okay, we're talking about one level differently. It's not a question of saying, here's the business needs, and therefore let's think about properly how to plan and implement the technology. What I'm saying is that there's significant input that technology can provide to actually changing what the business needs are in the first place. If we take a look, here's a perfect example. Okay, are you one of the few people that actually get a newspaper delivered to their home?
No, I don't.
But do you remember the time when you did?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, same here. Years and years and years ago. Okay, years ago. But here's my question to you. Is that a newspaper business, or is that a business? Because if it's just a newspaper business, the role of technology is to make sure that the printing is efficient as possible, to make sure that the advertising is the circulation is as efficient as possible. But what if instead of saying that's a newspaper business, maybe what you could say, it's a distribution company. The people that. What if you said it was an ad sales company? What if you would say it's a writing company? What if you can say, so if you took a look at that, you would say, okay, what if, for example, we could spin off the distribution company part of it? What if we could merge the Toronto Star with the Globe and Mail's distribution system? Why do we need two parallel systems? Okay, that's a very different mindset, because the technology required to support the Toronto Star and the Toronto Globe and Mail and the Toronto Sun to deliver all these different things is going to be very, very different technology than the system to run a newspaper, right?
Okay.
The question about how to, for example, if you looked at just the ad sales business, you'd say, well, gee, maybe we're not in the newspaper advertising business, but we're in the ad sales business. Maybe we should be selling everything from spots in the newspaper to spots online to maybe also selling Google and Facebook stuff. And maybe maybe we can also do newsletters that we could sell spots in. And all of a sudden, the ad sales business is a very different one than how many inches did you sell and the systems required to it. So if you were to say, it's not just a question of what's the technology to optimize, but you say, what's the technology that can be used as a strategic input to possibly even change the very nature of the business itself? No, it doesn't always change it, but maybe it pivots it slightly, right? Maybe it changes it a little bit slightly. And yes, all the plumbing stuff, the accounting system, the HR system, the computer help desk support system, okay? Those kinds of things you might say, well, maybe we can actually outsource some of that stuff. Maybe we don't need to have it internally, right? But if we only take a look at let's optimize what's there, we're in a different spot. So I, didn't mean to sort of say, oh no, Gurmeet, you got it wrong. You do have it right. But I'm saying we've got to look a bit bigger if we want to truly understand where the possibility is. Otherwise, we're no better than a salesperson for SharePoint saying, hey, buy SharePoint, you have knowledge management. Buy SAP, you've got an accounting system, right? And that's not where businesses should look to their technologists. And that's a big problem. By the way, it's a big problem because most technology people are experts at keeping the plumbing and the electricity working.
Yeah, very good at that.
It has to work, right?
Yeah, very good at that.
They're an expert at doing an upgrade from Windows 10 to Windows 11. They're an expert, for example, in maybe even doing a project from time to time, right? But as soon as you start to say transformation, or as soon as you start to say disruption, or as soon as you start to say IT deserves a seat at the strategy table, not just the tactical table, then we need people in the IT seats that actually know how to do that. For smaller businesses, very difficult. They can't afford it. So use consultants. Medium and large size businesses, oftentimes, yes, the chief technology officer, chief information officer, yeah, they've got that mindset. But still, sometimes they need external help just to get some outside the box thinking. And these are these are the challenges. I'm sorry for rambling on a little bit, but but obviously, I feel strongly about it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense though. But you're saying simply look at a strategy standpoint, even from business strategy. Technology may open opportunities to either grow your business or increase the revenue, even or changing a little bit direction. But that make complete sense. Now you're trying to figure out, how do I increase the revenue? How do I grow my business? How do I change directions with this help of technology? So you're aligning that with the business strategy. Is that what you're referring?
Yeah, or possibly even changing the business strategy.
Changing the business. Okay, good. No, that is excellent. Definitely, that makes a lot more sense. How about on operational level? Do you also look at, hey, how do I be more efficient on a payroll? We're costing us this much money to generate this kind of revenue. Is that also part of strategy? Hey, listen, maybe if I tweak a little bit here and there, maybe I can get better output from a payroll. I can get a better return from a payroll. I can automate some of those processes in a business as well.
Listen, almost everything is perfectly optimized now. Okay. Payroll, almost how many businesses are really, writing checks by hand now? Okay. They'll either print them off of their printer from some system, or they've outsourced it to some payroll provider. right? We're getting to the point now where a CEO will ask, for that next marginal dollar, is it that much important that I can make payroll checks pop out of the printer 3% faster? No, I think really where the huge opportunity is, excuse me, is at the intersection of marketing and technology, which is really where my area of expertise is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'll give you an idea. You know, there's a question. There's a concept called the customer journey or the client journey, and essentially it says from the I have no idea what to okay, let me sign on the contract or buy the product or engage the service, etc. There's a number of touch points that there is between them and the organization or agents of the organization. And at each touch point, right, what should happen is people are moved along the process of buying or engaging. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at those particular touch points, the question is, how might technology at each touch point make it easier for the customer to self-qualify to move on to the next touch point? Yeah. And certainly in the retail world today, there's been a massive movement to something called Omni-Channel. Mm-hmm. You know, the question of gee, you know, in the olden days, you and I, if we wanted to buy a computer, we would look in the, I don't know, PC World magazine or something. And we look, oh yeah, here. And then we would go to, I don't know, some computer store. Mm-hmm. And there'd be 5 or 6 or 10 computers there. And the salesperson would run through everything and you'd say, okay, I want that one, right? So, you know, but how do people buy a computer today? Well, I'll tell you, it's not one customer journey. It's multiple, right? For example, I may do some research online. I may go to, you know, the manufacturer's website. I may go to an enthusiast website. I may go to social media. Then what I'll do is I'll go into a store. I'll maybe fiddle because there's very few, you know, qualified salespeople to tell you all the stuff about the computer. Okay, they're really more there to help you transact. So you'll sort of do that. Then after that, what you'll do is you'll go to Amazon or you go to, I don't know, some online thing and say, okay, or Apple, I don't know. And you'll say, okay, I'm going to buy that one. But boy, you don't have it delivered to your house. You want it delivered to the retail store because it's close to your work where you're going to use it. So all of these, you know, different routes, all these different channels that a buyer can use, okay, to get from, gee, I think I may need a computer to, yes, I've actually bought one. Okay, that's what omni-channel means. And omni-channel marketing is the question of how might you track somebody's journey when they go through all these different channels to get to the actual purchase. And so if we think about where's the role of technology and at the intersection of marketing and technology, it's a question of saying, well, maybe as an organization, as a company, maybe we're not at the center of the universe. Maybe the product isn't at the center of the universe. There's product managers, right? There's marketing managers for the product, etc. Maybe what's at the what's at the bullseye, what's in the crosshairs should be the actual prospect or customer, client, not the product or not the company. And as soon as you do that, you say, okay, now I'm getting somewhere. Maybe there's a way I can use technology, since we're talking about technology today, to track that particular prospect through the touch points that they do. And we can understand what the route is. We can understand how we might use manual process and technology to make each touch point more efficient. We'll realize that the journey isn't one that's defined by us. It's defined by the prospect or the customer. And if we're able to use technology to do that kind of thing, all of a sudden we can say, okay, how might we actually market along that journey to provide them the information they need when they need it, to provide offers, for example, that are relevant at the time, to provide content and interactivity where it's needed and a human touch where it's needed as well. And so if we think about this in terms of the role of the IT folks, holy cow, this is very different than figuring out how to make a payroll system more efficient. Right? And it's certainly a very different thing that I don't know, the CFO is concerned about making sure the statements get popped out properly. Gee, we're going to close X number of days after the period. Very important. But where I see the huge opportunity, you could have a 0.5% improvement in payroll, okay, efficiency. But if you're able to understand how to use technology in a marketing sense, all of a sudden, for the first time, you've got a sense of how to amplify the marketing brain cells of those in your organization. All of a sudden, you could have a much better understanding of how people buy, and so if you let me go on for a moment, Gurmeet, I'll give you another example.
Sure.
We have something that's a profession that's been around for many years. It's called market research.
Okay.
In the olden days, thank you very much, you would do some market research to determine what your product or service is. You go to a sample and you'd assume, based on your choosing the right sample, that it's representative of a universe. Okay. And therefore, what you do after doing this market research, you'll first do some quantitative stuff of surveys. Then what you'll do is some focus groups, and then eventually, way over here, okay, you go to market, right? You'd spend a lot of money. Okay. You might do market research on the ads. You'll do market research on the packaging, and finally it gets to market. Okay, let's compare that to almost anything that Google does, and they don't do everything right, by the way. But guess what? They came out with a product called Gmail, and it was in beta. They came out with all kinds of other products. It's in beta. So rather, they'll iterate. And you'll know, as a technology guy, the concept of agile, where you're constantly develop, test, get feedback, redevelop, and you're doing it over and over and over and over, and it iterates to close to perfection. And along the way, there's all these mid-course corrections so that you end up exactly where you need to go, rather than there's all this market research and all this development, and then maybe when it reaches the market, it might not be what you need. So all of a sudden, we can use technology. Okay. Well, listen, the concept of a beta is not, frankly, very, it's not very, revolutionary, is it? But what we can do is we could take a look, because we know the market of one. Okay. If you come to my website and you fill out a form, Gurmeet, I know it's you. Then I know exactly what pages you go on. I see what's interesting to you. When you call me up and say, Randall, I'm kind of interested in this, I could bring something up on my computer, say, wow, Gurmeet was on this page and that page, and he filled out this form, and he clicked on this link, and he did this, whatever. So it's not creepy because you self-identified, but all of a sudden, I've got an idea. When we have this conversation in a customer and prospect-centric way, I know for the first time kind of what you're thinking about. And I could model, this is the big data thing. I could model, once I know all the Gurmeet judges around, what you're more likely or not to do. So when it comes to those mid-course corrections, right? I don't, this is the essence of using technology in marketing for all in one. So I don't know if this resonates with you or whatever.
Listen, with that, all software tools, or all software products that go through this iteration, they don't wait for, look at cell phones. They don't wait for to correct all the problems. They ship it out with all the bugs, and over the time they correct all those problems.
At that point, and once they've corrected all those problems, you got to buy a new phone because whatever.
Now they get a new product to sell. But that definitely makes sense. The data you correcting, improving user experience. If I'm a customer, my user experience gets so rich because the data I'm providing, you already have the data, and you're helping me to make a decision, much better decisions, because you have the data to help me out during my customer journey.
So where does this intelligence come from? You've got technologists on one hand who are thinking about how to optimize the ERP system to blah, 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 blah. Okay. You've got tech ops people that are just making sure that the email system continues to work,
Mm-hmm.
right? You've got a lot of marketing people, not all, but many of them, who are sort of captives of their ad agency, and it's all campaign thinking. Let's do a campaign. Let's do a campaign. But how about where does the knowledge or the creativity or the vision come at that intersection of marketing and technology, where we say, okay, how might we build a marketing stack, not just with technology components, but also some very interesting creative and process things going on at the same time. That's where I play, because I get hired by the marketing people to be able to talk to the IT people and say, okay, this is what we need. I get hired by the IT people to talk to marketing people to say, hey, this is what's possible, right? And it's not like they're talking oil and water. There's brilliant people who are marketers, brilliant people in technology, but sometimes, their expertise is so deep in their own area that they haven't spent all that time at the intersection, right? And if they did, they wouldn't be good at their core area, right? And so it's a bit of a challenge, but that's also why there's so much opportunity. And by the way, if you look at almost every vendor out there, a consulting firm, when they talk about digital transformation, typically, Gurmeet, they're talking about, let's put in a CRM.
They're talking about their own
tools.
tools.
Not just putting in a system. It's transformation possibly first, and then use digital. It's not, let's put in SharePoint for knowledge management, or we're going to, transform by using a CRM, et cetera. It's a, cart before the horse. And that's the biggest challenge that we face today in terms of truly harnessing technology, or truly getting to the next level in our marketing.
You think that the problem exists much bigger, a problem in a large corporations, also a small, medium business also struggle with the similar stuff, when they're trying to come across that?
So they both have their own unique challenges. Small, medium-sized businesses, oftentimes they don't have the, they're a lot more agile. They're often a lot more closer to the customers. Certainly the CEO and the CFO are concerned about making payroll, right? They're concerned about competitors that are going to nibble in. So they're a lot more agile, and that's good. But they're also leaner, which is one of their advantages. But leanness sometimes doesn't provide the bench strength to think through some of these possibilities. Okay, so that's their challenge. The bigger companies, sometimes, some people will argue that bigger companies are bloated. There's so many processes and people and so many divisions and so many different support groups and shared services and not shared services that it's almost, quote, impossible to get things done. And my message for that group is, well, there's ways of addressing that. Yes, you could put in place the big program, but you could do all kinds of other things. You could put together, and in financial services is a great example, major banks, but they're investing in small fintechs. They're putting together innovation centers where little pods of people can innovate like a startup almost, and pilot things before being brought out. Like, there's ways of doing this in large organizations, just like there's ways of making it happen in smaller organizations. And so they both have problems. They both have problems, but the problems have been solved before. You just might not have seen it yet, right? But the problems have been solved before.
Wow, interesting. Let's talk about thought leadership and a trusted advisor. So when it comes to these solving these problems, what do you describe? What are your take on a thought leadership, and what do you define as a trusted advisor, Randall?
So before we actually talk about that, I think it might be worthwhile to consider how pretty much every business competes. Okay, they compete on three dimensions: price, expertise, and trust. Okay, so for example, somebody says, and they've got some service, I don't know what it is, and they're charging $1,000. There's always somebody who will come by and say, well, I could do it for $900. And in fact, there's a lot of companies that compete only on price, right? And so that's a kind of not a good strategy, but it's one that if your cost base in a commodity business is the lowest, you're going to win. Okay, expertise is a little bit more important, right? People don't care about you. They only care about how you can solve their problem. So if you've got that expertise to solve the problem, then guess what? You're a lot better than if you're just competing on price. The only problem is this: there's always somebody who's got more expertise than you.
Yep.
There's always somebody who's just graduated with the newest knowledge. Or there's always somebody who might have spent a lot more on like degrees and other professional stuff, so that they're smarter than you. They've got greater expertise. So that's also a bit of a problem. Yeah. So that's price, expertise, and the last is trust. Yeah. So this is a little bit harder, okay, to lose on. If you've got somebody you trust, and I'm sure, for all of our viewers, if you think about it, you say, I've got a problem. Gee, I want to know about something or other. The first thing you'll probably do is go to that person you trust and say, yes, who do you recommend for fixing my roof? Gee, what computer would you recommend that I buy? And that person is very, very high in the trust scale, right? And the higher you are in the trust scale, the harder it is for somebody to knock you off your perch. So if you're competing, for example, on trust, okay, and somebody comes to you, Gurmeet, I know you're in the technology business, and says, Gurmeet, can you help me figure out how to do this marketing automation implementation? And that, for example, you probably could figure it out. You're a sharp guy, but gee, that's not where you spend all your time. If you are very high in the trust scale, you would say, I certainly know about it, but the best person to speak to about marketing automation is so-and-so. Well, guess what? What happens to your contact's trust in you? It goes even higher, because the interests are not self-interest, but the interests are for your client, your contact, your prospect, whoever it is that came to you, right? Boy, they'll come back to you again. Hey, Gurmeet, I want to implement an ERP system. And you might say, well, I'm really not expert in that, even though you might be. I'm just saying, you should speak to so-and-so. They're the best person in that narrow specific area. And so all of a sudden your trust goes higher and higher and higher. And then when they come to you and say, gee, can you help us with technology X, which maybe was your sweet spot in the first place? You could say, absolutely. And they say, well, how much would it cost? You tell them the price. And of course, because there's high trust, you're not going to, charge them like ridiculous, but you're not going to give them, you're not competing on price here. You're competing on trust. So you're going to give them a price, and they may not even go up for a competitive bid. They'll just say, okay, it sounds good. Send me the contract. Let's start. Yeah. So if you think about price, expertise, trust, every business competes on those three dimensions. And the strategy is how much you focus on for each of them. So now we get to the question of trusted advisor, thought leadership. If we have expertise, for example, expertise, if we amp that up, that's thought leadership. The more thought leadership you have, likely the more of a thought leader you are. The greater trust that you have with somebody, the more they'll look at you as a trusted advisor. Okay. So put a price aside for a moment. Those are the things that are so important. And interestingly, they're not the same. Being a trusted advisor is the person who could tell you the answer because you trust them implicitly. And being a thought leader is a measure of your expertise. So if you imagine two scales, okay, the x-axis is thought leadership, low to high, and the y-axis is being a trusted advisor, low to high. What are you if you've got high thought leadership and very high trusted advisor, very high trust? If that's what you are, you're a star. You got everything. But boy, does it take a lot of time to make sure your thought leadership is always up to speed, because if you don't keep yourself up to speed, you quickly become yesterday's news. If you're not working on the relationship and putting your clients first, the trust goes down as well, right? If you don't deliver, trust goes down. So it's hard to maintain stardom, but that's where everyone, on the other hand, if you have a low thought leader, you're not really an expert, and there's not much trust, you're a commodity.
Yeah.
And what do you competing on? Price. That's it. You're a commodity.
Yeah.
So stars on one side, commodities on the other, and then in the other two quadrants, if you're a high trusted advisor but very low thought leader, you're not an expert at all. I call those golfers. I call them golfers because, hey, it's all about the relationship. They're very trusted, okay, but they don't know much, right? Or what if they're really, really an expert, but there's low trust? Maybe that's academics. I call them academics. Think about the university professor, right? They might not have a relationship with you. They may have multiple PhDs and tons of academic papers. They truly are a thought leader, and they're very, very narrow niche. But what trust you have in them? Maybe you got some trust because of their reputation, okay? But in terms of the personal trust that you have with them, they haven't earned it with you yet. So everybody is a golfer, star, commodity, or academic. And you can choose which one you play in. And there's the strategy that you would implement to do the best within, each of them, and that's kind of where thought leadership and trusted advisor. So, one of my keynote presentations is called, it's not called thought followership. I see. Right. Yeah. And it speaks to the question of how do you become a thought leader? Yeah. What's the evidence? How can you do it? You can't fake it till you make it. You are or you're not. Yeah. Right. And so what are the activities that you do? Same thing with being a trusted advisor. There's a number of activities that you do. Talk about this as well. And the more you do them, the more likely you'll be a trusted advisor. In some businesses, that shouldn't be the strategy, right? Yeah. But in others, it's a clear differentiator. Otherwise, price, expertise, trust, you sort of devolve back to price, which we know isn't sustainable in most businesses.
Yeah, yeah. Very interesting. So, the skills that need for you to be start, are they a learnable skill? Can people develop those skills or through the training or different mechanism? Or is it somebody has it or somebody doesn't have it? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the best way to answer that question, I don't know if you remember way back in college, university, or maybe even high school. Do you remember they had these multiple choice tests, A, B, C, D, and I don't know, maybe there was a professor, a teacher somewhere in your past who said, we're going to do this next class on the strategy of how to handle multiple choice tests. Okay. Gee, first of all, you read the question twice. And then after you read the question twice, you look at the answers and you scratch out the one that is clearly wrong. Then now you've got 3 choices out of 4, not 3. But all that means, by the way, is that you're going to do better than a monkey if you choose 3 of them. Then what you do is maybe do a little bit of calculation. You say, well, it's more likely this one. And that's the one you choose. Okay. Well, listen, this is the strategy of how to do multiple choices. But if you don't actually know the subject matter itself, there's no way you can become a thought leader. There's no way, right? If, for example, I'm in the profession of bus driving, right? And I've decided I'm going to become a thought leader in the area of quantum mechanics, okay, quantum physics, right? Well, guess what? It's great to have aspirations, but unless you're willing to put in the time to learn about it, like get a PhD in the area, for example, you probably will not be thought of as a thought leader in quantum physics, if you're a bus driver. If, on the other hand, you've got a PhD in quantum physics, right? Maybe, being an expert and being a thought leader, maybe you've got a chance to change that I'm an expert in it to I'm a thought leader. Thought leaders need people who follow. And I'm not talking about these Instagram or social media influencers where people follow them. That's usually not thought leadership. That's just celebrity, following celebrities because you've got this, interest in seeing what their narcissistic behaviors of whatever. No, when we're talking about thought leader, it's a matter of saying, what is it truly that and that you're passionate about. What is it that you know better than anyone else? And then it's a question of saying, okay, let me write about it. Let me do research on the topic. Let me be involved in conversations with other people who are truly knowledgeable in the area. Let me speak at conferences about it. Let me be quoted in mainstream media about it. Let me go on the national news and be asked by the anchor about it. Let me serve clients and have people pay me because they value my thought leadership. Like there's all those kinds of things. This process to sort of help go through each one of them, but unless you have that knowledge in the first place, then it's very hard to suddenly become a thought leader.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. No, you gotta be expert on your field before you even look at, very interesting. So how do business leader who's listening, most of our audience is business leaders, either CEO or president of the company. How do they go about it? Digital transformation we talk about. How do they start the journey, or even if they want to develop their leadership skills? How do they approach these two subjects? How do they start the process?
Well, I guess I would say, if you decide that this is a route that you're going to go, it's something that is very much a competitive advantage compared to others who aren't. Okay. President's Choice started with Loblaw's president, Dave Nichols, being on TV talking about all these unique products. It wasn't that he was, a spokesperson. They could have hired some actor to do that. He had done all the detailed work of putting in place the process to discover all these amazing new products, then to bring them to life, right? So the cheap, fast way to at least become a little bit more knowledgeable on thought leadership and how to become one, go to randallcraig.com. I've got 600 articles on there that you can read. There's no cost to that at all. And that'll give you hundreds and hundreds of ideas of how to do that. Somebody asked me when I wrote my first book, Randall, how do you become a great author? And then before that, they asked me the question, how long did it take for you to write this book? Was it like 6 months or 2 years? And I said, it took me an entire life, because that book one was something that had all of my experiences just compiled in one particular place. Yeah. I do coach business leaders on this particular topic. I take on a small number of them each year. There is a process to it. But a lot of it is, hey, if you want to be an author, you've got to start writing. If you want to speak, you got to speak, right? But there's ways to shorten. If you're already an expert or you're aspiring to be an expert, there are some things that you can do. And it's not just telling somebody, this is the strategy of how to go about answering multiple choice tests. It's really more of a very, very specific, here's the recipe. You want to make a souffle, you better follow that recipe, right? Otherwise, it's not going to be a souffle. But you'll get something. It might not be as edible. It might be a lot slower, etc. So part of it is finding ways to develop a deeper thought leadership so that you're ahead of the pack. Part of it is a question of communicating it outward. And whether it's blog posts or podcasts, or whether it's white papers, whether it's books, whether it's actually speaking at conferences, and how do you go about that? So all of that is part of the how. And like I said, look on my website, randallcraig.com. There's all kinds of articles that can get people forward, or reach out to me and I could talk to you about it too.
Yeah, no, very interesting. I learned so much from our discussion. I think every business leader to look into new ways of either transform their business or looking to build a business strategy. This time of the year, normally business leaders will start building the business strategies for next year's. I will definitely encourage them to have a chat with you, and you can always offer a different in a different perspective. One thing I wanted to talk about, I loved your one blog post where you talk about McDonald's strategy versus the Five Guys strategies. And I love the Five Guys strategy. It was very interesting. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit.
Oh, man. Yeah. So you do that, or if you go to podcast.randallcraig.com. You can see my video on that as well. You know, I don't know. It's not that McDonald's or Five Guys are my places to go for meals, you know.
Yeah.
But they do have a completely different strategy. You know,
Mhm.
McDonald's is something for everybody. Literally, there's something for everybody for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, everything. Five Guys, on the other hand, is basically burgers and fries and milkshakes, and I think they sell hot dogs now. And by the way, if for those vegetarians who might be listening, they make a grilled cheese. It's a hamburger with it's cheeseburger but without the burger.
Mhm.
So the two strategies are very, very different. McDonald's is one of variety. It's one of options, and their deal is that if they provide lots of options, people
Pick one.
can always find something. They just head to McDonald's, just like the department stores of old. You know, if you want something, go to the department store. It's there.
Mhm.
Five Guys says, well, here we just focus on this. This is what we do best. If you want an egg salad, don't come to us. If you want a burger and fries or milkshake, come to us. We're all about focus, and we do that better than everything. And if you think about what both of those strategies, it's interesting because once you've decided on focus versus options, how you market and how you operationalize, oh my God, there's all kinds of things that fall out of that.
Mhm.
Guess what? I bet that given the volume of hamburgers and the focus they have on operations, Five Guys is very, very specific about how they train people. And they don't have to train them on how to make 50 different items. They just have to train them on how to make burgers and fries and shakes.
Yeah.
And because of that, it's easier to get people up to a level of excellence. McDonald's, on the other hand, because they've got so many different things, it's a different story. And the marketing messages for both have got to be different as well, based on that strategy. The one thing, though, that I would sort of say, because I've thought about this actually a lot, is I'm just wondering whether it's not actually the same strategy. Because one time, years ago, McDonald's only had burgers and fries and shakes.
Yeah.
And it's only once they became excellent in that they start to add a bunch of other things. McCafe, they're a leader in the coffee world, but 10 years ago, they were making crappy coffee, right? They had things like McRibs. Remember those? Or McPizza.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're kind of gone or only seasonal things now. So maybe, you know, if we went fast forward 20 years from Five Guys, maybe they'll decide to add on extra menu items, right? Just so they could eventually grow up to be McDonald's. Kind of doubt it, but I'm just thinking. Or maybe McDonald's will say, hey, we've become so diverse, so many different options. Maybe we need to take a little bit more of the Five Guys focus strategy. And if we think about what this means, for businesses, you know, what strategy are you? Are you a McDonald's focus or a Five Guys? McDonald's options or Five Guys focus? And if you think about the marketing strategy for both, very different. If you think about the underlying technology required to support both, very different. Certainly at the intersection of them, it's very different as well. So that's I talk a lot more about that, but that's Five Guys versus McDonald's.
Would you say Five Guys, you know, back to our discussion, they're competing on expertise because they gotta be so good at that burger because they only have a few options, you know, they're so focused on a strategy. They're competing on expertise because they have to be excellent on making those few items that they are focused on.
Well, I would say that at one time, I'll reframe your question. At one time, McDonald's was focused on price. At one point, they actually advertised way back when 5-cent hamburgers or 10-cent hamburgers, right? Focused, and it was the operational excellence that allowed them to reduce the price so much. Okay, I think that as time has gone by, they've realized that they can charge a premium for a number of different items, but they still have these value menu kind of items as well to focus down. McDonald's has got a very, very complex pricing and marketing strategy, but it's certainly changed over the years. I think that both McDonald's and Five Guys compete on trust. You can trust that the McDonald's hamburger, whether you buy it in Bangor, Maine, or London, England, or Paris, France, or Toronto, Canada, where I'm located, is going to taste pretty much the same. That the fry is going to be the same no matter where. When they moved into Russia, for example, they had to work with Russian farmers to get the kind of potatoes that they actually wanted, right? So Five Guys is the same thing. You've got that same Five Guys kind of flavor, if you will, and in-store experience, whether you're in Washington, D.C. or Mississauga, Canada. It's the very, very same experience. So they're all trying to compete on trust. And I would probably say they're also trying to compete on expertise, and they're trying to move away from price, right? So that's kind of my view on that. Can I just add one other thing for you? Sure. Because I think getting back to the from marketing to technology, another chain, Tim Hortons, also very, very well known for its coffee and for its breakfast and meals, actually. Very, very successful here in Canada and in a growing number of places in the United States. They decided a couple of years ago that they're going to use technology. They're going to have an app, which obviously makes sense. Everyone's got an app, and theirs is going to focus on loyalty. And so it's good that it focused on loyalty, and rather than little pieces of paper where people chunk out whatever. The problem though with Tim Hortons, when they implemented that app, they turned on location tracking. Okay. And because they turned on location tracking, and every 10 seconds or 30 seconds, it would call home and say to Tim Hortons, oh, this is where Randall Craig actually is. Oh, Randall Craig's now at the bus stop. What they did then, and they, by the way, they never kind of asked my permission for that. They were just stealing my location, right? Then what they would do is they would contract with data brokers, where they would give all the raw data, and they would marry that data up with real world locations. Gee, Randall just went into a Starbucks for a coffee. Gee, Randall is, this is likely Randall's home. This is likely Randall's office. And as a result of that, they had a very, very scary view of all kinds of stuff that I didn't give them permission to actually take. And this is very problematic. There was a very, very big expose of those particular practices. There's no doubt, and I'm sure they've ratcheted that back dramatically. There's, I'm sure, many other apps that do location tracking that people either say yes to, or it's on Android by default, and it's very problematic. And the reason why they do this is because a marketing person said, hey, because we can, I guess we should, or maybe a technology person said that, but they never thought about the definition of trust. And that when people find out that there's creepy tracking technology that's being married with data that they had no idea their data was going to be married with, trust goes down. And when trust goes down, price, expertise, trust, that's not very good. That's not very good. So even though there's a great promise of big data and everything at the intersection of marketing and technology, it's got to be done in the service of building trust, rather than some opportunistic optimization desire that eventually will destroy it.
Even you have a data, even you can do something, that doesn't mean you should do it, because now you're jeopardizing a trust with the customers.
Exactly.
Interesting. Very interesting. I learned so much from our discussion. I will definitely encourage all business leaders to reach out to you for conversation. Who knows, where the opportunity lies in a business. Sometimes just a little conversation can point you in the right direction. Where can people find you, Randall? What's the best way to be in touch with you?
Best way is to go to www.randallcraig.com, RANDALLCRAIG.com. All my contact information is there, as well as literally hundreds and hundreds of articles and a whole bunch of white papers, all at no cost.
Beautiful. Good stuff. Thank you so much for our time today, Randall. And thank you so much. I learned so much, and I think everybody who watched this conversation, they're going to draw huge value, and hope they enjoy the discussion we have today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.